Hey guys, and welcome to ED News for the 1st of April and the week that's just passed. So starting with Dota 2 news once again, the Dream League Season 9 minor on the Pro Circuit had its final last Sunday night, as we mentioned briefly in last week's news episode. In the final between Team Secret and Fnatic, Secret ultimately came out on top in a comprehensive 3-0 whitewash of Fnatic. This pushed Secret closer to qualifying for the International. They're currently 3rd in the Pro Circuit standings, but they've got a comprehensive lead over 4th place in the teams below, so they've got a comprehensive chance of qualifying for the International in the next couple of events they play in. Also, the Dota 2 Asia Championships continue for the next week up until next weekend. The group stage actually wraps up today, and the main event of the tournament will span the whole way to next weekend. This actually makes it one of the longest tournaments since the International last August, which for really big Dota 2 fans like me is really exciting because it means you get to watch a lot of Dota and get to see a really diverse range of strategies from a lot of different teams from all over the world. Adding on top of this, Dota 2 also had its 7.12 gameplay patch this week, and with that patch there were numerous changes to both items and heroes. However, perhaps the most significant change in the 7.12 patch was the addition of Pangalia, a new hero that was released last November, to Captain's Mode, which is the mode that tournaments are played on in Dota 2. I'll definitely go into this in more detail in future, but the mode basically allows teams to ban heroes they don't want to play against. Anyway, releasing the 7.12 patch at this point in time was kind of a controversial move to some, especially adding Pangalia into the game when they did, as the patch went live after the Dota 2 Asia Championships had started, and they'd already commenced their group stages basically. However, at least from my personal perspective, and from a viewer's perspective really, it often makes the games more interesting as teams try and work out how the meta might change in the midst of a really important tournament. Like, the tournament has a $1 million prize pool, and teams are currently having to work out how strategies might change based on the changes in the patch, so I think that's really interesting personally, and a lot of people agree with me, but definitely for the players it might be a bit frustrating as they have to get used to an entirely new meta and changes whilst in the midst of a really big important tournament. Alright, so moving on to League of Legends news now. The Oceania Pro League Split 1 for 2018 concluded with its grand finals this weekend. I know that's a bit of a mouthful. Basically, the Oceania Pro League is split into 2 splits across the year. So there's one in the first half of 2018 and one in the second half of 2018, and each year after that. The Australian teams Direwolves and Chiefs battled it out to become Oceania's representative at Riot's League of Legends Mid-Season Invitational in Europe in May, which is one of League of Legends' big events that Riot holds every year. In a really tight best of 5 series, Direwolves completed a reverse sweep of the Chiefs. If you don't know what a reverse sweep is, it basically refers to a team winning the final 3 games of a best of 5 series. It can be used to describe best of 7 series and best of 3 series as well, but it's most commonly used when talking about a best of 5 series. So Direwolves, often referred to as the Wolf Pack, have now won their 3rd OPL trophy in a row, having taken out both of last year's splits, and so they'll travel to Berlin and Paris to represent Australia at the Invitational in May. If you're really into Australian esports, as I am personally because I'm Australian, this kind of stuff's really cool. It may not be that interesting for people overseas, but definitely for me as an Australian, seeing our esports scene grow and seeing these teams battle it out in an international tournament is very exciting. So I'll be looking forward to the mid-season Invitational coming up in May. So speaking of reverse sweeps, in fact, if we move on to Overwatch news, in last week's Overwatch League Stage 2 finals, New York Excelsior managed to complete a reverse sweep of Philadelphia Fusion in the grand final of the stage. So they won the grand final 3 maps to 2 to bring home $100,000 in prizes. The Fusion had already surprised everyone, to be honest, by beating the fancied London Spitfire in the playoffs to reach the grand final. However, New York Excelsior were just a bit too good for them in the end. The Fusion really pushed New York to their limits, more than a lot of people would have thought they would have, but the Excelsior were just too good and managed to close out the series in the end. Stage 3 of the Overwatch League begins this week after players have had their week off between stages. With only 2 stages remaining before the season playoff, New York are pretty well placed, to be honest. They've only dropped 2 series out of 20 played so far, so they have an 18-2 record, which is amazingly good. Below them, only 5 series victories separate the 2nd place London Spitfire on 15 wins and the 8th placed Los Angeles Gladiators, who are on 10 wins. Meaning that these next 2 stages will be very tight and will be a fascinating road to find out which 6 teams will make their way into the season playoffs. I'll leave a link to the current standings for the overall season in the description down below if you're interested, and the webpage also gives a little explainer as to how they'll determine which teams qualify for the playoffs for the season. And in Stage 3 also, just a quick little note, it'll also be the first time that the new hybrid map, Blizzard World, will be featured on the Overwatch League stage. This is a map themed upon the idea of a Blizzard game theme park, Disneyland style kind of thing. It's a pretty cool map if you haven't seen it, so if you're interested to see some pros play on it and find out all the interesting strategies that you can use on that map, tune into the Overwatch League this week and you'll definitely see some of that map in play. Moving on to Hearthstone esports news. Last week we only really had news about the Witchwood, but this week we do have some news about one of the Hearthstone Championship Tour stops. I think I got that right. But basically, the 6th tour stop of this season of the Hearthstone Championship Tour happened last weekend, HCT Oslo as it was called. The tournament took place in Norway and it was ultimately won by Italian player Turner, who won the Grand Finals 3-1 against Czech Republic's Faili. I think I pronounced that right, but I'm not 100% sure. So I kind of plan to break down the HCT and Hearthstone esports in a future video, as it's really just a little bit complicated and convoluted. I don't fully understand it myself and I've done quite a lot of reading about it. But the summer season of Hearthstone esports is now close to wrapping up, and the Summer Championship will be coming up in a couple of months' time. And at the Summer Championship, we get to see the best players across the season battle it out for a big prize, and a chance to play at the World Championship early next year. I mentioned the Witchwood earlier. Card reveals for that upcoming expansion are now well underway. They started last weekend, and with the standard format rotation occurring at the same time as the expansion's release later this month, the competitive scene's meta is sure to be really vastly shaken up before the Summer Championships, so it'll be really interesting to watch the Summer Championships and see what kind of decks are being tested out, if there's any really interesting new decks that have come out as a result of the new standard rotation and expansion. The Hearthstone Wild Open for 2018, which is one of the few wild format tournaments you get each year, is also going on currently, and I'll give you more news about that next week with the winners and the final results. And finally for this week we have a bit more Counter-Strike news. So I mentioned last weekend that the Starladder Invitational was going on. Again, I'm not going to pronounce the name because I'm just not going to get it right. But the finals between Tyloo and Spirit took place last Sunday, in Australian time of course. In the end, Tyloo took out the $75,000 first prize in a 2-0 win in the grand final. They won pretty comprehensively in the end, winning 2 maps and not even needing to go to a third. The Copenhagen Games have also concluded, with Imperial taking a 2-1 finals victory over Heroic and taking home $50,000 in prizes themselves, which is a pretty nice little bonus. And finally for this week, CSGO also had its own little patch this past week, with minor adjustments to the maps Dust 2 and Canals, and slightly more comprehensive changes to the map Nuke. The map Nuke had already undergone significant changes in a February patch, but developer Valve really felt the need to change a few more things about the map to get it to where they wanted it to be. Anyway, that's all the news we've got for this week. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Give me some feedback in the comments if you think there's anything I could improve on. I've already tried to improve a couple of things this week, so we'll see how they go. And let me know if you like it a bit more, or if there's things I could definitely improve on. That would be very helpful. On a separate note, I was meant to release a bonus declassifying esports language video this past week, but things got in the way, so I didn't get a chance to do that. But I'm going to try and release that one tomorrow, and then on Thursday you'll get your regular declassifying episode. This week we'll be starting to break down particular genres of games you'll find in esports, starting with the MOBA. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you for more ED news next week.